I was fixing a fence post when a real estate agent asked if I was the landscaper. The question didn't bother me. Not really. I looked the part, mud-caked boots, sun-faded hat, leather gloves worn thin. But when I told her I was the owner of the land, her entire face changed. She went pale, muttered something into her earpiece and backed off like I was holding a shotgun. I wasn't. I was holding a broken cedar post from the east fence line, splintered at the base, probably from the heavy machinery I'd seen rolling in the past week. I'd thought they were county workers fixing the old drainage easement. I was wrong. My name's Cole Barrett. Mid-40s. I came back to the Barrett Ranch in Tennessee after my father passed. It's 200 acres of rolling pasture and woods, with old zoning grandfathered in from before the war. Agricultural. Untouchable. At least that's what I thought. I'm not a recluse, just a man who's known both cities and cattle, and chose the one that doesn't lie to you. Used to be a land rights consultant out in Denver before I gave that up for a quieter life. These days I fix fences, raise 2 horses, and walk the same dog my wife picked out 5 years before cancer took her. I still wear the ring. The Barrett land is sacred to me. Has been in my family since 1871. My grandfather fought to keep it out of corporate hands, and my father once sued a highway project into oblivion to protect the watershed that flows beneath our woods. Every acre is documented, titled, mapped, and updated. I've kept it that way. So imagine the gut punch when I saw fresh concrete poured just 50 feet from the red barn. At first, I thought it was an accident. Maybe county workers veered off a road expansion. Maybe the neighbor's property lines got confused. Then I saw the signs, "Welcome to Oak Haven Estates, modern living, rustic views." In shiny bronze. Set into a limestone marker that hadn't been there yesterday. I followed the sound of beeping machines to the south ridge. That's when I saw them, surveyors in neon vests, digging stakes into the earth. A bulldozer. 2 dump trucks. An entire development team tearing up my back pasture. Who authorized this? I asked. A young contractor looked at a clipboard and said, HOA development project. You're on phase 2 of the Oak Haven expansion. He handed me a printout. The parcel number had my land ID. I blinked at it like it was in a foreign language. Is this a joke? No, sir. The printout was labeled Tract 91A, Abandoned Agricultural Zone, transferred by municipal tax claim. My name was nowhere on it. It was impossible. I drove straight to the county office in town. 20 minutes later, I was staring at a screen with a blinking cursor and a single line of legal fiction. Owner of record, Lakeside HOA Development Trust. I asked to speak with the clerk. She explained that, 6 months ago, my property had been flagged as delinquent on taxes. According to their software, it had triggered a municipal easement forfeiture clause due to non-use. It was nonsense. My taxes were paid automatically through the trust account my father set up. But when I checked the system again, I saw it. 1 year the payment hadn't been processed. A bank merger had rerouted the autopay and the payment bounced back. No notification. No lien letter. Just a silent digital error that labeled my home as inactive. The HOA had petitioned for abandonment, citing a clause in an outdated municipal charter. They filed the claim under easement law, arguing the property was unused and unsecured. A judge signed off on it with no contest, because I never received notice. I stormed out of that building and drove back. Fast. That's when I met Trina Caldwell. Trina stood at the base of my hill wearing 6-inch heels and a lavender blazer, sipping cold brew from a mason jar like it made her folksy. Blonde bob. Wedding ring so big it needed its own insurance policy. The type of woman who said y'all like it was a costume. You must be the old owner, she smiled. I'm still the owner. She gave a tight-lipped laugh and pulled out a laminated parcel map, waving it like a winning poker hand. This map has been court-approved, Mr. Barrett. You're welcome to file a complaint, but we're well within our rights. This land has been unused for years. It was seized through legal right of easement after your tax status changed. I stood there, silent, the wind tugging at my sleeves. Behind her, the ground where my daughter's memorial tree once stood was now a muddy depression filled with runoff. A bulldozer idled nearby. I planted a tree there, I said quietly. For my little girl. Trina blinked once, then said flatly, we had to clear a retention pond for drainage compliance. It's best not to get sentimental. Progress requires sacrifice. I didn't speak, because if I had, I might have screamed. Instead, I turned, walked down to the base of the hill and stood at the edge of the pit. The cherry tree was gone. The wooden plaque I'd carved with my own hands, gone. Just a broken chain-link fence post, crushed under tire tracks. Trina followed me halfway and smirked. "If the paperwork's wrong," she said, "you're welcome to sue us." I looked at her and smiled. "That's the plan." She laughed like I'd told a joke. Her team chuckled with her. Some developer in a polo shirt said something about angry rednecks with tractors. They moved on, their laughter bouncing off the hills. They didn't see what I saw, because they didn't know my past. They didn't know that for 15 years I fought and won property rights cases for landowners from Alaska to Arizona. That I'd ghost-ridden lawsuits for farmers who barely knew how to turn on a laptop. That I'd once halted a billion-dollar fracking pipeline with a single procedural challenge in a rural Wyoming court. They didn't know that I had no intention of raising my voice. I would raise hell on paper. And I would not lose. The morning after Trina Caldwell laughed in my face, I didn't call anyone. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just walked into my grandfather's old study, still smelling faintly of pipe tobacco and saddle leather, and pulled the original land files from behind the false wall in his bookshelf. The folders were yellowed, brittle with age, but the content was meticulous, each deed notarized, every plat signed in ink, every amendment hand-delivered and acknowledged in triplicate. My grandfather had trusted the law more than men. That's why he documented everything. I laid them out like a general preparing for war. By noon I had help. Mason Dillard, my godfather and a retired judge with more wisdom in his silences than most men have in their arguments, shuffled into the study and removed his gloves. When I heard what Trina pulled, he said, "I figured you'd be back in here." He flipped open one of the files and nodded slowly. "They're going to regret this." "Not yet," I said. "But soon." Mason called it building cases like stacking dry tinder, one match and it all goes. That afternoon my niece Kylie arrived from Nashville. 17, whip-smart and bored with high school, she greeted me with a laptop already booted up. "Heard you got bulldozed," she said. "Let's get digital." Together, we began scanning the documents, comparing them to recent county plat filings and HOA development records. Kylie pulled up drone footage from her hobby rig, video showing where fences had been cut, lines repainted, and my no trespassing signs quietly removed. I couldn't prove who did it, but I could prove when, and that timing was about to become very important. We needed the missing piece, someone inside the county office who hadn't been seduced or silenced by Trina Caldwell. That's when I remembered Samira Farrow, a county records officer I'd worked with years ago when advising on disputed mineral boundaries. Sharp, principled, and quietly furious at the way HOA developers manipulated grieving landowners, she didn't hesitate to meet us. She didn't speak much at first. Just opened her drawer and slid over 3 things. A forged plat map submitted 6 months prior, showing my western pastures as utility easement reserve. A return to sender notice for the alleged seizure, never legally delivered. A notarization stamp on a transfer document that had expired 3 months before it was used. This wasn't sloppiness, Samira said. This was fraud in slow motion. That night the pieces came together. Kylie pulled county auction records. Trina's HOA was leveraged heavily, taking loans against the HOA's own reserves. The trick? They bundled homeowner dues as collateral. It was legal but risky. And now they were underwater. "They're propping up their scam with straw and duct tape," Kylie said. "You want to own them, Uncle Cole?" I looked at Mason. He smiled. The next day we made our first quiet move. Barrett Land Trust LLC was born, fronted by me, legally distant from my personal identity. I transferred the entire 200-acre deed into the trust and filed a public affidavit that revoked all implied access easements associated with the land. That one move made dozens of HOA site plans instantly non-compliant. Without access to my roadways, fire lanes, or utility paths, they were effectively building isolated islands. Then, with Mason's quiet guidance, we began attending county lien auctions under separate buyers. We didn't buy houses. We bought HOA debts. Trina's HOA had racked up liens on dozens of properties, disputes with painters, landscapers, irrigation companies, even their garbage pickup. One by one we bought the liens and bundled them into holding files under a separate trust, Fletcher County Restitution Holdings. They thought we were investment flippers. We were slowly becoming their creditors. Meanwhile, Trina doubled down. She sent HOA citations to property address 22, my barn, demanding I pay for not having a white picket fence, threatening court action over non-permitted livestock, and insisting I owed past due dues for amenities I never used. I filed each notice. Stamp. Time. Locked. Mason said, "She thinks she's winning." "No," I replied. She's digging. The final stroke of the section came late one night when Kylie cross-checked a legal boundary from a 1984 soil survey and found a fatal flaw in their case. A 9-foot overlap of residential foundation over protected agricultural buffer zone. A violation of state law. That was the wedge we needed. I called Samira. If we file, I asked, can we seal the motion for 90 days? Under certain hardship protections, yes, she said. You'll be quiet. But they'll be blind. We filed the quiet title suit under seal, citing misfiled boundaries, unlawful seizure and chain of title fraud. We didn't serve it. We didn't leak it. We just let it sit, a loaded chamber and a gun they couldn't see. A week later, Mason sat on the porch beside me, sipping his coffee slowly as the morning sun lit up the half-built cul-de-sac below. They're building houses on sand, he said, voice calm. No, I replied, watching as another foundation truck rolled up. They're building them on my land. Ends with, Barrett Land Trust's quiet title lawsuit filed under sealed motion. The clock begins ticking but they don't know it yet. It was the kind of sunny afternoon PR firms pray for. Red ribbons. Champagne flutes. Glossy brochures fluttering in the breeze. A crowd of well-dressed families clapped as Trina Caldwell snipped the ceremonial ribbon on the 90th and final home of Lakeview Estates. Balloons soared behind her like a coronation. She didn't know that same morning 90 certified letters had landed in homeowners' mailboxes. Each envelope bore the letterhead of Barrett Land Trust, LLC, and was printed on heavyweight legal bond. Inside. This letter serves as formal notice that your property resides on land with pending ownership litigation. In accordance with recorded easement revocations and unpermitted infrastructure usage, you are subject to monthly access lease fees and utility passage agreements, retroactive to date of occupancy. Failure to negotiate settlement terms may result in lawful eviction under Tennessee Code 66-28-102C. The effect was instantaneous. By evening, the next-door forums were melting. Homeowners didn't understand. They called the HOA. The HOA blamed county records. Someone leaked the lawsuit file to the Tennessee Ledger. The headline the next morning? 90 homes. No land. Barrett Trust lawsuit exposes HOA fraud. By the following week, Trina Caldwell's world was collapsing. The HOA meeting that month looked more like a courtroom riot. Homeowners were red-faced, shouting. One man slammed his mortgage file down and shouted, "You told me this was clean. I've got kids in that house." A woman in the back sobbed openly. "I just buried my mom. I used her inheritance to buy this place. Now you're telling me I'm trespassing?" Trina tried to blame the title office. Then the county. Then a clerical mishap. But people had read the letters. And they all said the same thing. The land didn't belong to the HOA. It never had. Meanwhile, I stayed out of sight. I let the chaos breathe. Until one rainy afternoon, a young couple knocked on my porch. I recognized them from Lot 54, maybe late 20s. They were soaked, nervous. The man took off his cap. "Sir, Mr. Barrett, right? We bought one of the new homes. I think we made a mistake." His wife held his arm tightly. "We wanted to raise our daughter there. It was our dream. We didn't know." I looked at the little girl hiding behind her parents' legs and thought of the tree bulldozed in the pasture, my daughter's tree. "You're not the problem," I said quietly. "The paper pushers are." That was the emotional moment. But the tactical one came hours later, when Samira called with a fire in her voice. She'd been digging deeper, matching wire transfers against HOA escrow accounts and developer LLCs. What she found stopped everything. A $680,000 payment wired from the developer account to a Cayman Island shell company, registered to none other than Trina Caldwell. Worse, it had been executed before the HOA even filed for land seizure. "She sold rights she didn't own," Samira said. "She made herself the developer of your land, and cashed out before a single permit was approved. It wasn't just fraud. It was criminal conspiracy. We now had banking proof, notarization fraud, illegal wire transfers, and title misrepresentation. That's when I made my move. I sent a letter to every homeowner, not as a threat but as an offer. Barrett Land Trust offers a permanent legal solution. In exchange for 1% nominal equity in your home, the trust will grant you full residential rights, legalized utility and access easements, immunity from eviction, transferable title insurance corrections. This offer expires in 30 days. Most signed within the first week. Some called me personally, crying with relief. They thought I wanted to destroy their lives. I didn't. I just wanted my land back, and justice with it. Trina, however, wasn't done. She filed an emergency injunction trying to block my legal hold. It failed within 48 hours. The judge cited overwhelming evidence of foundational fraud, and scheduled a full hearing for property restoration and damage recovery. Her lawyers backed out the same day. Then came the final act. I assembled a file, thick as a brick. Inside, certified fraudulent transfer records, bank wire statements, IRS whistleblower documentation, the formal eviction notice for Trina's own home, which sat squarely on my land, Lot 01. I didn't send it by email. I walked up her stone steps, past the doormat that said "Welcome to the Queen's Castle," and left the file in a weatherproof binder right on her porch. Inside was a handwritten note. "I don't need your homes. Just my land back. Plus interest. Cole Barrett." I turned and walked away. She opened the door just as I stepped off her porch. Our eyes met. She said nothing. She knew. The fallout wasn't loud, it was surgical. By the time the court hearing convened, Trina Caldwell was already flailing in a sinking ship. Her emergency filings had all been denied. Her developer partners had ghosted her. The board members, some complicit, most just negligent, resigned en masse when the federal subpoenas arrived. The IRS didn't just investigate the land transfer fraud. They unearthed undeclared offshore holdings, misappropriated HOA funds, and altered filings going back years. Trina was quietly indicted on 3 federal counts: wire fraud, conspiracy, and falsification of public records. She was removed from HOA leadership by unanimous vote. Well, almost unanimous. Trina abstained from a bench inside county holding. The scandal rocked the county. Local zoning committees were forced to publicly re-evaluate their protocols. Cole's case was now case law in Tennessee, cited in 2 ongoing suits within weeks of the verdict. A quiet legal storm had formed from one man's calm resistance. And the homes? They stood. Not as disputed properties anymore, but as examples of how justice can be reclaimed without fire, and how the law, when respected, can be the sharpest blade of all. It was Kylie who suggested the idea. We were sitting under the oak tree that now marked the northern boundary of the retention pond. The very one that had destroyed his daughter's tree. "You could turn this whole thing around," she said. "Make it something for them." "For who?" I asked. She nodded toward a boy flying a kite in the field. "The kids growing up here now. The ones who didn't ask to be part of any of this." So we rebuilt the retention pond, reshaped it into a natural park with walkways, benches, and a single plaque beneath a young flowering cherry. "In memory of Anna Grace Barrett, you grew where you were planted." The community began to change. Slowly. Sincerely. Without Trina's grip, the remaining homeowners called an emergency assembly. They voted, 74-3, to dissolve the HOA permanently and restructure under a co-op ownership trust. The legal advisor for that co-op? Cole Barrett and Associates, a consulting firm founded the following month with Kylie as its digital records director. It was poetic. What began as theft ended in trust. Cole had every legal right to evict the homeowners who hadn't signed the settlement. He didn't. Instead, he offered each holdout a 99-year leasehold estate under full residential rights. No interest, no games, just dignity. Some cried when they signed. One man hugged him, whispering, "Nobody ever fights for the little guy anymore." But you did. Mason wasn't one for speeches, but he made an exception. At the first annual community barbecue in the new Anna Grace Park, he raised a paper cup of sweet tea. To the man who never raised his voice, but raised the bar. The crowd clapped. Some stood. Others just nodded, quietly acknowledging what it all meant. Kylie got a full ride to Vanderbilt Law a month later. Mason had called in favors, pulled strings, and sent a glowing recommendation that ended with, "This girl knows how to spot the cracks in a case. And she knows how to fix them." She left for school with her drone gear still in the back of her car. As for Trina, her story ended the way it began, with arrogance undone by ignorance. The court froze her assets. She was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison with 5 years of supervised release. No press release. No headlines. Just a line on a docket that would follow her forever. Her house. Foreclosed. Later sold at auction. Guess who bought it? The sun was low the evening Cole rode out. The homes were still there, row after row of clean siding and slate rooftops. But the mood had shifted. Children laughed from porches. Families waved as he passed by on horseback. They knew who he was now. Not the rancher. Not the obstacle. The man who saved their homes. And reclaimed his own. He reached the old pasture fence, freshly rebuilt and reinforced. The grass was green again. The old windmill turned lazily in the breeze. He tipped his hat to the horizon and sat quiet in the saddle. They thought silence meant surrender. But I wasn't quiet because I was weak. I was quiet because I was already winning. If this story moved you even a little, drop a comment below and tell us, what would you have done if someone tried to steal your land? Backhand index pointing down. Speech balloon. We read every message and your support means the world. Fire if you believe in justice, quiet strength, and standing your ground without losing your soul. Subscribe now and be part of a community that honors true stories of grit and redemption. Bell, hit that bell so you never miss the next quiet takedown. Because sometimes, the calmest voice leaves the deepest mark.